The night my bones finally gave up on me, my daughter stood in the doorway and said nothing. I remember the sound first, not my own voice, not the crash of my body against the kitchen floor. It was the hum of the refrigerator, steady and calm, like nothing terrible was happening at all. The light above the sink flickered once, then stayed on. I lay there staring at it, my cheek pressed to cold tile, my breath coming in shallow pulls that burned my chest. Somewhere behind me I heard a chair scrape, shoes shifting, and then silence again. That was the moment I realized silence can be louder than shouting. I did not know then how much would be taken from me. I did not know how long it would take to understand what my daughter's quiet really meant. All I knew was that my son-in-law's shadow stretched across the kitchen floor, and my daughter, Emily, did not step in front of it. I am telling you this now because stories like mine do not begin with anger. They begin with trust. They begin with love built slowly, brick by brick, until you believe nothing could ever knock it down. Before that night my life was ordinary. That is important to say. Ordinary lives are the ones that break the hardest. I was 58 years old and tired in the way women get tired when they have spent decades carrying other people's needs before their own. I worked part-time at the county library, shelving books and helping older folks with the computers they pretended not to understand. My house was small, but it was mine. A pale blue bungalow with white trim, a creaky front step, and a maple tree out back that dropped leaves like coins every autumn. I raised Emily there by myself after her father left. She was 8 years old, missing 2 front teeth, when he packed his clothes into black trash bags and said he needed space. I remember kneeling in front of her, smoothing her hair, promising her that we were enough, that we would be okay. And we were for a long time. Emily grew into a thoughtful child, quiet, observant. She had a way of watching people without interrupting, like she was collecting pieces of them. Teachers said she was mature for her age. Friends told me how polite she was. I took pride in that, maybe too much. When she met Mark, she was 26. She brought him home on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day that smells like laundry soap and pot roast. He stood too close to her when they came in, his hand firm on her lower back. He smiled easily, shook my hand like he meant it, and complimented my house as if he were already imagining himself inside its walls. Mark was charming in a practiced way. He spoke confidently, laughed at his own jokes and told stories where he was always the reasonable one. I noticed small things even then. How he corrected Emily mid-sentence, how he answered questions meant for her, how his eyes stayed sharp even when his mouth smiled. But I told myself I was being protective. Mothers often confuse instinct with fear. I wanted my daughter to be happy, and she looked happy, leaning into him, nodding along. They married 2 years later, a small ceremony. Emily wore a simple ivory dress, her hair pinned back. When she hugged me after the vows, her hands trembled. I asked if she was nervous. She smiled and said, "Just excited, Mom." After that, they moved into my house. It was supposed to be temporary, just until they saved enough for a place of their own. I agreed because that is what mothers do. We make room. At first it was fine. Mark helped with groceries, fixed the loose cabinet hinge, called me ma'am in front of others and Ruth when we were alone, like we shared something. Emily cooked dinners and left notes on the fridge when they'd be late. I told myself this was family. This was the reward for all those years of doing it alone. Slow changes do not announce themselves. Mark began making suggestions about bills, about repairs, about how much the house was worth if I ever thought of selling. He said things like, "You shouldn't have to worry about all this at your age, and Emily and I can handle the hard stuff now." I laughed it off. I was not fragile. I paid my own mortgage. I balanced my checkbook every Sunday morning with a cup of weak coffee and the radio humming in the background. Emily grew quieter. She stopped sitting with me in the evenings, stopped asking how my day was. When I spoke, she listened, but her eyes drifted toward Mark like she was checking something invisible between them. When I asked her if everything was okay, she said yes too quickly. The first time Mark raised his voice at me, it was about the thermostat. He said I was wasting money, that heat should be set lower, that I needed to be more mindful. His voice filled the kitchen, firm and controlled. I looked to Emily. She stood at the counter, hands busy with nothing, eyes on the sink. "Emily," I said. She did not look up. After that, the lines blurred. Mark took over paying bills so things would be simpler. He asked me to sign papers I did not fully read because he said they were routine. He started referring to the house as our place. And Emily stayed quiet. I told myself she was adjusting to marriage, that loyalty changes shape when vows are involved. Still, something in my chest tightened every time she chose silence over me. The night everything broke began like any other. Rain tapped against the windows. I burned the toast and laughed at myself. Mark came home late, his jaw tight, his coat damp. He asked where a certain envelope was. I said I did not know what he was talking about. His face changed then, not angry, cold. "You need to pay attention," he said. "This is important." I told him to lower his voice. This was my house. He stepped closer, too close. Emily was there, standing by the doorway, watching. When his hand hit my shoulder, it felt unreal, like it belonged to someone else's story. When I lost my balance, the world tilted sharply. The floor came up fast. Pain shot through my hip, my back, my ribs. I heard Emily whisper his name, just once. That was all. As I lay there gasping, Mark told me I was dramatic, that I slipped, that I needed to stop making trouble. He told Emily to get the car keys. She hesitated, then she moved. At the hospital they said my hip was fractured, I would need surgery, time to heal, time away from stress. I asked for Emily. She came the next morning, sat beside the bed, held my hand loosely like she was afraid to grip too tight. "Mom," she said softly, "let's not make this harder than it needs to be." That was when I knew something had already been decided without me. As the machines beeped and the smell of disinfectant filled the room, I realized my daughter had made a choice long before I ever hit the floor. And she chose silence. The hospital room had no sense of time. The lights stayed the same dull yellow whether it was morning or night. And the air always smelled faintly of plastic and antiseptic. I lay there listening to machines breathe for me, counting the cracks in the ceiling tiles, trying to understand how a single moment could peel your life open like that. Emily visited every day, always alone. She brought me lip balm once because she said my lips looked dry. Another day she brought a sweater and draped it over the back of the chair, but never helped me put it on. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, shoulders slightly hunched, as if she were waiting for instructions she could not hear. I wanted to ask her questions, about Mark, about the house, about that night. But every time I opened my mouth she looked so fragile, so carefully held together that the words folded back inside me. "Mark been handling things at home," she said one afternoon, eyes fixed on the floor, "so you don't have to worry." That sentence stayed with me. I had not asked him to handle anything. The doctor explained my recovery would take months. Physical therapy, limited mobility, no stairs for a while. I nodded like a good patient, pretending I had somewhere safe to go. When I asked about going home, Emily hesitated. "Mark thinks it might be better if you rest somewhere else at first," she said, "just until you're stronger." Somewhere else, as if my house were not mine anymore. "Emily," I said carefully, "what do you mean?" She swallowed. "It's just temporary, Mom, please don't get upset." Upset, that word again, as if my reactions were inconveniences. Mark came to see me the day before I was discharged. He stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, expression neutral. He did not ask how I was feeling. He did not apologize. He told me arrangements had been made for me to stay at a rehabilitation center for a few weeks. "You'll get proper care there," he said, "less stress for everyone." I looked at my daughter. She nodded just slightly. I signed the discharge papers because I was tired, because pain makes you agreeable, because I still believed in some foolish corner of my heart that this would all make sense soon. The rehabilitation center was clean and quiet, too quiet. Days blurred together in slow motion. Nurses came and went. Therapists stretched my leg and told me I was doing well. At night, I lay awake listening to other people groan softly in their sleep. Emily called once a day, short calls. She asked about my exercises, reminded me to eat, told me Mark was busy with work. She never mentioned the house unless I asked. When I did, her answers were vague. "We're organizing things," she said, "trying to make it easier when you come back." I started noticing gaps, missing details, little evasions that did not match the daughter I raised. One afternoon, I asked the nurse if I could have my mail forwarded from home. She looked confused, said there had been a change of address submitted weeks ago. Weeks? I asked to see the form. It was signed, my name, but the handwriting was not mine. A chill settled in my stomach. That night I called Emily again. My voice shook despite my efforts. Why was my mail redirected? I asked. There was a pause on the line, long enough for my heart to start racing. Mark thought it would be simpler, she said. So important things don't get lost. Emily, I said, forcing myself to breathe, did you sign anything for me while I was in the hospital? Another pause. I heard a faint sound in the background, Mark's voice low and distant. He was just helping, she said. You were under a lot of medication, Mom. That was the moment the ground beneath me shifted. Helping does not require secrecy. Helping does not erase consent. When I hung up, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely press the button. I stared at them for a long time. These were the same hands that braided my daughter's hair before school, that packed her lunches, that worked overtime shifts so she could go on field trips. I had trusted her with everything. The next morning I asked the social worker if she could help me get copies of my financial records. She looked surprised but did not question me. A few days later, she returned with a thin folder. What I saw made my chest ache. There were withdrawals I did not recognize, documents filed without my knowledge, a power of attorney form dated during my hospital stay, my signature again, almost right but not quite. Mark's name appeared everywhere. I felt foolish, angry, ashamed, but beneath all that was something colder, a sense of being erased while I was still alive. When Emily visited that evening, I did not ease into it. I held the folder between us like a fragile thing. Explain this, I said. She froze. Her face went pale. She did not look at the papers. She looked at the door. I didn't know what else to do, she whispered. What did you do? I asked. Her eyes filled but no tears fell. He said you weren't capable, that it was temporary, that it was for your own good. And you believed him. She pressed her lips together. Her shoulders shook once. I was trying to keep the peace, she said. Peace at what cost? I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I felt oddly calm, like something inside me had gone very still. I raised you to speak, I said, not to disappear. She flinched like I had struck her. That night after she left, I stared out the small window at the parking lot lights and made a decision. Silence had gotten me here. It would not get me out. When I was cleared to leave the centre, Mark did not come. Emily picked me up alone. The car ride was quiet, too quiet. The streets near my house looked unfamiliar, like I was passing through someone else's neighbourhood. When we pulled into the driveway, my breath caught. My maple tree was gone. The front door had been repainted, a darker colour, the porch furniture replaced. This is, I began. Emily turned off the engine. Her hands clenched the steering wheel. Mark thought it was time for some updates, she said. Inside, everything smelled different. New furniture polish, fresh paint. My photographs were gone from the walls, my bookshelves half empty. Where are my things? I asked. In storage, she said quickly. It's just until. I did not let her finish. I went to my bedroom, or what used to be my bedroom. The bed was different, the dresser gone, in its place a desk, Mark's computer. Something inside me cracked quietly. Mark came home an hour later. He looked surprised to see me standing in the living room. You're early, he said. This is my house, I said. He smiled thinly. Not anymore. The words hit harder than any shove. Emily stood behind him, silent. I realized then that the first clue had not been the paperwork or the money or even the fall. It had been her quiet, her willingness to let my place in my own life shrink until there was nothing left to defend. That night I slept on the couch, staring at a ceiling I no longer recognized, listening to footsteps above me. And I began to understand that what had been taken was not just my home. It was my voice. I did not sleep that night. The couch smelled like someone else's laundry soap, sharp and unfamiliar. Every time I shifted, pain flared through my hip, a dull reminder that my body was still mending even as my life unraveled. Above me, I heard Mark packing. The soft thud of his footsteps moved from one end of the house to the other, steady and deliberate, like he was counting something only he could see. Emily did not come downstairs, not once. Morning came quietly. Light filtered through the new curtains, pale grey instead of the yellow ones I had sewn myself years ago. I lay there listening to the house wake up without me, coffee brewing upstairs, a cabinet closing, a laugh that stopped abruptly. When Emily finally came down, she looked like she had not slept either. Her hair was pulled back too tight, her eyes rimmed with red. She set a mug on the table near me. "Drink this," she said. "It'll help." I sat up slowly. The room tilted for a moment before settling. "We need to talk," I said. She nodded, but she did not sit. "I want to see the paperwork," I continued. "All of it." Her fingers tightened around the back of the chair. "Mark's late for work," she said. "This isn't a good time." "There hasn't been a good time in weeks," I said. My voice surprised me, calm, steady. "You signed something in my name, I want to know what." Her eyes darted toward the stairs, then back to me. "He said it was legal," she whispered, "that it was just to help manage things while you were sick." "And the house?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "It was complicated." That word again, complicated, as if complexity excused betrayal. "Emily," I said, "look at me." She did. For the first time in days she really looked. Her expression broke something open in my chest. She was scared, not of me, of him. "He refinanced it," she said finally. "Put it in both our names." My breath caught. "He can't," I said. "It's mine, it's always been mine." "He said you agreed," she said quickly. "That you wanted to help us get started, that you trusted him." I leaned back against the couch cushions, the room buzzing in my ears. "He lied," I said. She nodded once, a small defeated motion. "And you let him," I said. She did not answer. That afternoon, while Emily was out, I went to the spare room where my things had been shoved into boxes. Dust hung in the air, catching the light. I opened one box at random, old photo albums, birthday cards, a chipped mug Emily made me in 3rd grade with my name misspelled. I sat on the floor and cried then, quietly, the kind of crying that feels like your body finally giving up the fight. When Mark came home that evening, I was waiting at the kitchen table, the papers spread out in front of me like evidence. "We need to talk," I said. He glanced at the documents, then at me. His face did not change. "You shouldn't be stressing yourself," he said. "You're still recovering." "I know what you did," I said. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me, calm, controlled. "I took responsibility," he said. "Someone had to." "You took my house," I said. He smiled faintly. "You weren't using it." The audacity of that sentence stunned me. "I raised my daughter in this house," I said. "I worked for it, I paid for it." "And now it's part of a family," he replied. "Isn't that what you wanted?" Emily stood in the doorway, watching. "You had no right," I said. "I had consent," he said, turning slightly toward Emily. "Didn't I?" She hesitated. The room seemed to hold its breath. "I thought it was temporary," she said softly. Mark's jaw tightened for just a second before smoothing again. "Temporary doesn't mean secret," I said. "You both signed my name." He leaned forward. "You should be grateful. Without me you'd be in a facility right now. I gave you a place to come back to." "A place, not my home." "Get out," I said. He laughed quietly. "You can't ask me to leave my own house." That was when the truth settled fully into my bones, not as a shock but as a heavy, undeniable weight. He had planned this, slowly, carefully, and Emily had stood by, hoping silence would keep her safe. "I'm calling a lawyer," I said. His eyes hardened. "I wouldn't recommend that." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It's advice," he said. "Think about what you'll lose." Emily looked between us, her hands shaking. "Mom, please," she said. "Can we just calm down?" I stood up, gripping the edge of the table for balance. "I am calmed," I said. "I'm finally awake." That night I locked my bedroom door. The old lock had been replaced, but I slid a chair beneath the handle anyway. My phone buzzed with messages from friends I had not spoken to in weeks. I realized then how isolated I had become without noticing. The next morning I called an attorney recommended by a woman I knew from the library. Her voice was firm and kind. She told me to bring everything I had. Emily watched me pack a small bag. "Where are you going?" she asked. Somewhere I can think, I said. She reached for my arm. I pulled away gently. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said. I know, I replied. That doesn't change what you let happen. I stayed with my sister for a few days, slept in a real bed, ate food that tasted like comfort, told her everything. Saying it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. The attorney confirmed what I feared and what I hoped. What Mark did was not clean. There were gaps, irregularities, things that did not add up. He took advantage of your condition, she said, and your trust. Emily called every day. Sometimes she cried, sometimes she was quiet. She asked what she could do to fix things. Tell the truth, I said. She did not respond to that. A week later I returned to the house with a police officer and my attorney. Mark was furious. His composure cracked. He shouted, accused me of betrayal, of ingratitude. Emily stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. When the officer explained the situation, when the papers were served, when the reality of consequences settled in, something shifted. Mark's confidence drained away, replaced by something small and bitter. This didn't have to be public, he hissed at me. It didn't have to happen at all, I said. As they escorted him out to cool off, Emily collapsed into a chair. I didn't know how to stop him, she sobbed. I knelt in front of her, pain flaring through my hip, and took her hands. You start by speaking, I said, even when your voice shakes. She nodded, clinging to my fingers like she used to when she was little. But some things once broken do not fit back together the same way. The discovery was not just what Mark had done. It was who my daughter had become while I was not looking, and who I had allowed myself to become by staying quiet too long. The house felt different after that day. Quieter but not peaceful, like a room after an argument where the air still remembers raised voices. Mark did not come back that night, or the next. His clothes stayed in the closet, his shoes by the door, but his presence lingered in every corner like a bad smell you cannot open a window wide enough to clear. Emily moved through the house like a guest afraid of overstaying her welcome. She washed dishes that were already clean, folded laundry twice, spoke only when spoken to. I watched her from the couch, my leg propped on pillows, wondering how two people could share the same space and be so unsure of where they stood. My attorney, Susan, came by that afternoon. She sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a calm steadiness that made me feel less unmoored. Here, what we're going to do, she said, tapping her pen. We move slowly, but we move firmly. She explained things in plain language, how the forged signatures mattered, how my medical condition at the time worked in my favor, how the refinancing could be challenged. You'll need statements, she said, from anyone who can speak to your condition and his behavior. Emily sat quietly at the end of the table. And your daughter, Susan added gently, may need to tell the truth under oath. Emily's head snapped up. I will, she said quickly, too quickly, her voice wobbled. Susan nodded. Good. After she left, the house settled into an uneasy stillness. Emily finally sat across from me, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. I didn't think it would go this far, she said. I know, I replied. That's how it always starts. She looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes were red and tired, but there was something else there too. Regret, maybe, or the beginning of it. He told me you'd turn on us, she said, that you'd try to ruin our marriage. I exhaled slowly, and you believed him. I was scared, she said. He said if I didn't support him, we'd lose everything. You already did, I said quietly. That night she slept in the guest room, the one that used to be mine when my back hurt too much to climb the stairs. I lay awake listening to the house breathe, thinking about all the ways fear makes people cruel without realizing it. The following weeks were a blur of appointments and paperwork, physical therapy in the mornings, meetings with Susan in the afternoons. Each step hurt, but I welcomed the pain. It reminded me I was still here, still capable of moving forward even if it was slow. Mark called twice, left messages that swung wildly between anger and pleading. You're destroying everything, he said in one. Think about Emily. In another, his voice softened. We can fix this, just drop it. I did not return his calls. Emily began opening up in small pieces, not excuses, explanations. She told me how Mark had gradually isolated her, how he framed control as concern, how he convinced her that conflict was dangerous. He always said keeping quiet was the mature thing, she said one evening as we ate soup at the table. I thought I was being loyal. I stirred my bowl, watching the steam rise. Loyalty without honesty is just obedience, I said. She nodded slowly, as if storing that away. When the court date was set, word spread faster than I expected. Neighbors asked questions, friends from the library called, some offered support, others were awkward, unsure of what to say. I told the truth when asked, not with drama, not with bitterness, just facts. He took advantage of me while I was injured, I said, and I'm correcting that. The day of the hearing, Emily sat beside me. Her hands shook as she held a tissue. Mark sat across the room, his lawyer whispering in his ear. He did not look at me. When Emily testified, her voice broke at first, then it steadied. I signed documents I shouldn't have, she said. I knew my mother didn't understand what was happening, and I stayed quiet. The room was silent. I thought I was protecting my marriage, she continued, but I was hurting my mother. I felt something shift inside me then, not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. Mark's lawyer tried to frame it as a misunderstanding, a family dispute. The judge did not seem convinced. When it was my turn, I spoke plainly. I trusted them, I said, and that trust was used against me. The ruling did not come immediately. These things take time, but the temporary orders were enough. Control of the house returned to me. Accounts were frozen. Mark was instructed to stay elsewhere. When we left the courthouse, Emily cried openly. I don't know what happens now, she said. We find out, I replied. That night the house felt quieter in a different way, lighter. I slept in my own bedroom for the first time since the hospital. The bed was gone, replaced weeks later with a new one. It did not matter, it was my room again. Emily stood in the doorway. Good night, Mom, she said softly. Good night, I replied. But even as things began to shift in my favor, I knew the hardest part was still ahead. Legal battles end, emotional ones linger. I was not seeking revenge. I wanted my life back, my name, my place. And I wanted my daughter to understand that silence can be a choice. And every choice leaves a mark. The consequences did not arrive all at once. They never do. They came in small, steady waves, each one carrying Mark's name a little further from the man he pretended to be. When the temporary orders became public record, people started talking, not gossip in the cruel sense, more like quiet recalibrations, the kind where someone says, I didn't know, and then starts replaying old conversations in their head. Mark worked in sales. Reputation mattered to him, trust mattered. When word reached his office that there was an ongoing legal dispute involving forged documents and elder exploitation, he was placed on administrative leave. That was the phrase they used, administrative leave, clean, neutral, but I knew what it meant. He came by the house once unannounced. I was sitting on the porch, the autumn air cool against my skin, watching leaves collect near the steps. Emily was inside on a call with Susan. Mark stopped at the edge of the yard, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense. This didn't have to happen like this, he said. I did not invite him closer. You could have spoken to me, he continued. We could have worked something out. You didn't want a conversation, I said. You wanted control. His jaw tightened. Emily's devastated, he said. You've put her in an impossible position. I stood up slowly, leaning on the railing. No, I said, you did, when you asked her to choose silence over truth. He scoffed, you're exaggerating. I met his eyes. For the first time he looked unsure. Leave, I said. He lingered a moment longer, then turned and walked away. His steps were slower than I remembered. Inside, Emily sat at the kitchen table, her phone face down. She had heard everything. He blames you, she said quietly. I know, I replied. That's easier than facing himself. Friends from church brought casseroles. Neighbors stopped by with muffins. Small gestures that reminded me I was not as alone as I had felt on that kitchen floor weeks earlier. Some people asked why Emily stayed with him as long as she did. Others asked why I let him move in. I answered honestly. Because love makes you hopeful, I said, and fear makes you quiet. Emily moved out a month later, not back to Mark, to a small apartment across town. She said she needed space to think, to breathe. I helped her pack. As we folded clothes, she paused, holding a sweater. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, she said. I considered that. The word forgive is heavy. It implies an end. I was not there yet. I'm willing to talk, I said. That's where it starts. She nodded, eyes wet. Mark's consequences continued to unfold. The refinance was reversed, the house title restored fully to my name, his access to certain accounts was permanently revoked. The judge did not mince words in the final ruling. Abuse of trust, undue influence. Mark did not attend the final hearing, his lawyer did. When Susan called with the news, I sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. It's done, she said. I closed my eyes, not in triumph, in relief. That evening I walked through the house room by room, touched the walls, the door frames, the window sills. I brought my photographs back out of storage, hung them myself. Each nail felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Emily came by later. She stood awkwardly in the doorway. I signed the lease today, she said. That's good, I replied. She hesitated. I'm filing for separation. I nodded once, no celebration, just acknowledgement. He keeps calling, she added, says I betrayed him. I looked at her, really looked. Tell me something, I said. When you think about that night in the kitchen, what do you feel? She swallowed. Shame, she said, and fear. And now, I asked. Anger, she said, at him, at myself. That's a beginning, I said. We sat together in the living room, not close, not far, just present. Outside, the maple tree stump was still there. I had not had it removed yet. Something about it felt honest, a reminder that even strong things can be cut down, and that regrowth takes time. Mark's name faded from conversations, from invitations, from the casual way people spoke about him. He became a cautionary mention, a lesson. I did not rejoice in that. I did not need to. Justice, I learned, is not loud. It does not shout or gloat, it settles, it restores balance. And as the world adjusted, so did I. Healing did not arrive the way I thought it would. I expected relief to feel like joy, like a deep breath after being underwater too long. Instead, it felt quiet, uneventful, like waking up in a familiar room after a bad dream and realizing the furniture is still where it belongs. The house slowly became mine again, not in a legal sense, in a living sense. I replaced the curtains with the yellow ones I had sewn years ago. I brought my books back onto the shelves in the order I liked, not alphabetical, by memory. I planted a new maple sapling in the backyard, not where the old tree had been, but close enough to feel its presence. When I pressed the soil down around its thin trunk, my hands ached, but it felt right. Emily came by once a week at first, always with something small, groceries, a plant. A loaf of bread from the bakery she passed on her drive. We talked carefully, about the weather, about my therapy, about her job. We avoided the sharp edges until one afternoon she finally said it. I don't know why I froze, she said. We were sitting at the kitchen table, sunlight warming the surface between us. I was peeling apples for a pie. Sometimes, I said, people think silence will keep them safe. They don't realize it only keeps them stuck. She nodded slowly. He never hit me, she said quickly, not like he did you. I looked at her then, really looked. Harm isn't a competition, I said. Control wears many faces. Her eyes filled, this time the tears fell. I thought if I kept him calm, things wouldn't get worse, she whispered. And did they? I asked. She shook her head. We let the question sit between us, heavy, necessary. Emily started therapy. She told me about it in fragments, about learning to recognize manipulation, about unlearning the idea that peace means absence of conflict. I didn't know I was allowed to be angry, she said once. You always were, I replied. My own healing took shape in different ways. Physical therapy strengthened my leg, but it was the emotional exercises that challenged me most. Trusting again, not assuming control where kindness was offered, letting people help without handing over my power. I returned to the library part-time. My co-workers welcomed me back with quiet warmth, no fuss, just smiles and a chair pulled out for me at lunch. One afternoon, a woman I barely knew asked me how I found the courage to stand up to my family. I thought about that. I didn't feel brave, I said. I just got tired of disappearing. Emily finalized her separation papers in the spring. She did not ask me to come with her. She did it on her own. When she told me afterward, her voice was steadier than I remembered. I told him no, she said, out loud. I smiled then, a small one but real. As months passed, our relationship changed. It did not snap back into place, it grew differently. Slower, more honest. We learned how to speak without walking on glass. One evening she stayed for dinner. We washed dishes side by side, the radio playing softly. I'm sorry, she said suddenly, for staying quiet. I turned off the tap. I know, I said. That was all, no speeches, no absolution, just acknowledgement. I learned something in those months. Silence does not always mean lack of love. Sometimes it means lack of courage. But understanding that does not mean excusing the damage it causes. I forgave Emily not in a single moment but in many small ones, each time she chose to speak, each time she chose herself. As for Mark, he faded from my life entirely. Occasionally someone would mention him. I did not ask questions. His chapter was closed. On the anniversary of my fall, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the new maple tree sway gently in the breeze. It was still thin, still fragile, but rooted. I thought about that night on the kitchen floor, about the hum of the refrigerator, about my daughter's silence. And I realized something else. I had been silent too, for years, about my own needs, my own boundaries. I had taught Emily to be strong, but I had not always shown her how to protect herself. Healing, I learned, is not about going back to who you were. It is about becoming someone who will not accept less than dignity again. I tell this story now with a steady voice, not because it no longer hurts, but because it no longer owns me. What happened in my home did not begin with cruelty. It began with quiet choices, with moments where speaking felt harder than staying still, with love tangled up in fear and loyalty confused for silence. That is how these things usually happen, not all at once, but little by little, until one day you look around and realize you have been pushed out of your own life. If you are listening to this and something in your chest feels tight, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not weak for staying quiet once, or twice, or even for a long time, but you do owe yourself the chance to speak when staying silent starts to break you. Families are complicated. Love does not always protect us the way we think it should, and sometimes the people closest to us fail us, not because they are evil but because they are afraid. That does not erase the damage, but it does remind us where healing begins. Today my house is mine again, my name is mine, my voice is mine, and my relationship with my daughter is not perfect but it is honest. That honesty cost us comfort, it cost us illusions, but it gave us something stronger in return. So I will leave you with this question. If the roles were reversed and you were standing in that doorway, would you choose silence, or would you choose to speak, even if your voice shook? If this story touched something in you, take a moment to sit with it. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, stories about truth, consequences, and finding your way back to yourself, stay with me. Subscribe, support the channel, you are not alone here.